Welcome to my show. A guest here. His name is Brian Sachetta. Mr. Brian, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Temmie.
All right, sir. Firstly, you are an author. You are also a blogger. Can you please, sir, Mr. Brian, discuss more about yourself and how we are doing currently now, sir?
Yeah, sure. Just to, I don't kick things off, I'm Brian Sachetta, author and owner of Get Out of Your Head, which is both a brand and a book series that seeks to help people manage anxiety and depression. So on the book side, or on the authorship side, I have two books. One that is focused on helping folks with anxiety, another that is focused on helping folks manage depression. And then on the blogging side, right, it's kind of more, hey, I have a specific idea for, one tactic for managing our mental health or rethinking stress or something like that. A smaller idea that I want to be able to put out in public or share with my audience sooner than, say, a full book, right? Because writing, let's say, a 200-page manuscript, that takes a lot of time. And I'm actually in the middle of a rewrite of my first book right now. It'll be a second edition of that book. And I think firsthand, I can kind of just say that that has taken a real long time. And so the blog, even though I haven't been able to put out as many posts as I would like to as of late, is a nice medium to be able to share, more immediate information than say, spend a year or two, maybe even more on a book. So.
Completely agree. Thank you so much, Mr. Brian. It's definitely not easy. When it comes to writing, it's definitely not easy. And can you please, discuss more on your book, which is Get Out for Your Head, and the one you are trying to rewrite in the coming future, Mr. Brian?
Yeah, for sure. I think another piece of context that would be helpful here, right, is like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a clinician. I'm just a dude, right? I'm somebody who has, like my readers and like my audience, been through, a lot of challenges on the anxiety side, the depression side, just the mental health side in general. And so, what happened was I basically went through 10 years of intense anxiety in my teens and then my early 20s. And throughout that process, I was trying to learn as much about my condition as I could, right? So I was like, hey, this anxiety hurts and it's painful and I don't like living with it. So I want to try to improve my condition, improve myself, and improve my life. And by going about and doing that, I started learning different things, right? So I would read a bunch of books. I would read journal articles. I would listen to books on tape. I would go to therapy, and I would essentially just kind of took all this information that I was learning, and I synthesized it and said, okay, which of these ideas resonate with me? And then of those ideas, which ones do I want to take and experiment with in the real world? So as an example of that, I may say, or I may have said to myself, or I mean, I definitely did. It's like, okay, I'm going on a date with a woman that I find attractive. And normally this sort of thing makes me anxious. It makes me nervous. Instead of going to that date and doing all the same things I normally do, why don't I take some of these different tactics that I have learned in my explorations and experiment with them, try them out a little bit, right? So, for example, I would say, okay, I just learned this thing called box breathing, which is essentially a way of trying to calm yourself down and your body down in the moment when you're feeling fearful, you're feeling anxious. And so it's a pattern of breathing in for 4 seconds or some, set amount of seconds, holding for that same amount, breathing out for that same amount of seconds, and then pausing and holding the out breath or just kind of being there for another 4 or so seconds. And so what you're doing, right, is I guess the metaphor is drawing the four sides of the box. So in is one side, hold is another side, out is another side, and then hold from there is the last side. And so the idea is just to put some more focus on your breathing and on your body and give yourself the ability or the chance to maybe calm yourself down in the moment, right? So going back to the first book and how this all relates was I went through this process of, let's say 10 or so years going to different things that made me anxious, different events, situations in my life and trying out these different tactics. Eventually, I got to the point where I was like, I've tried a lot of these out. These are the ones that I feel work for me, and these are the ones that I feel don't work for me. I'm not saying that I'm indicative of every person in the world that experiences anxiety, but I do think I have some, firsthand knowledge here that could be valuable for folks. So in essence, right, that first book is sort of an encapsulation of those 10 years of the work that I did on myself and with these different tactics. And its goal is to help people find some of the methods that will work for them in the reduction or mitigation or management of their own anxiety. The book itself is not only a retelling of those different stories, but it's also, me, excuse me, retelling of those different tactics, but it's also me coming in and sharing my own stories, some of the, the different situations that I went to where I tried on some of these tactics. And then also it's, me talking about some of the research that I did, bringing in some of the scientific research just to give it a little bit more credibility, right? So I tie it all up in this nice little package where then hopefully folks will be able to read the book, take a lot of things away for themselves that they can then apply in their own lives and hopefully mitigate some of their own anxiety. So that is the first book. And yeah, the rewriting process that I'm on right now is, the book itself is going to be essentially the same. It's just that I wrote it 2017, it's now 2015. So I wrote it about 8 years ago. And, when you were in your 20s, which I was at the time, 8 years is a good amount of time. And my writing style has changed. And I think I've matured somewhat or a decent amount and whatnot. And so I'm just trying to reflect all of that in the manuscript, make it tighter, make it more approachable for folks, hopefully reach more people, and then be able to, in turn, affect and help more people.
Completely agree. You have gotten to be more, advanced, more much, even have more experience when it comes to writing books. We'll be expecting that, Mr. Brian. Thank you so much, Mr. Brian. And I would like to dive to the point of panic attack, Mr. Brian. In the time we are today, there is anxiety. Even anxiety could lead to depression most of the time. And what is the most worstest of all is that panic attack. I would like to ask Mr. Brian, what do you think is exactly is a panic attack, and how do you think it's extremely differ from anxiety, Mr. Brian?
Yeah. So, based on the question, I think we can obviously say that the two things are closely related, and yet they are not the same things, right? So, if we talk about anxiety and maybe generalized anxiety, anxiety is more akin to the word worry, right? So, we are in our heads, we're chewing over different ideas. And potential outcomes and situations, and that makes us nervous. So that feeling of nervousness is I'm not going to say that it's always low grade, but it's lower grade than a panic attack, right? So you may be nervous throughout the day, for an hour, for a couple days, for a couple hours, whatever it may be, but it is more manageable than a panic attack, right? To contrast that with the idea of a panic attack is something more acute, more intense, and has a different duration, right? So if we think about what does a panic attack look like? It's very severe in the sense that you have physical symptoms that are very strong and very scary. That might mean that your heart is totally racing. It might mean that your thoughts are racing and you can't, form kind of coherent sentences or thoughts or anything like that. Your palms may sweat. You may have severe, butterflies in your stomach or feel as though you might throw up. You may even, there's a term called like dissociation. There's another one called derealization. So dissociation is kind of feeling as if like, you're not connected to the present moment because your body is experiencing so much stress that it's trying to get out of there, right? Your mind is trying to turn off from the panic that it's experiencing. And then the derealization piece is, your mind is going through so much stress. It's kind of a continuation of that last item, which was the dissociation. The derealization is feeling as though almost you're like in a dream or you're not in real life, right? And why the mind does that is it's saying, I'm experiencing so much stress right now. I'm trying to get out of here. And if my body can't get me out of here, then my mind's going to get me out of here by kind of creating this false dreamlike state. And it's not, it's not really like a happy dream. It's kind of more like a nightmare. And so I guess to recap, right, we've got the severity. So panic attacks are more severe than I guess their counterpart of more generalized anxiety. I don't think I necessarily touched on duration, but duration is important here as well, which is to say that like, I'm sure folks have experienced panic for long periods of time, but on average, panic attacks tend to last anywhere from like a minute to 20 minutes. 20 minutes is kind of long, and there's some science behind why that's the case, which is essentially your brain releases different chemicals. So like adrenaline and cortisol might be rushing out when the panic attack starts. And yet, there are longer acting or longer releasing neurotransmitters that then come into play and calm you down after a certain amount of time. And so typically the panic attack will not last for an hour. It'll usually last, 10, 20 minutes when something like acetylcholine starts running through your bloodstream and calms you back down on a neurotransmitter or hormonal level. I think the last piece that is probably worth talking about is just the cause and of panic attacks, and that might lead us into a different question. So I guess I would just say that anxiety tends to be more like thinking, worrying about certain situations, things that you might be doing that day or whatever. Panic attacks and again, there's overlap here, right? But panic attacks tend to be linked more towards traumas that we have experienced in our lives, high level stressors, things that we have not worked out that we know on some level we need to work out. For example, like being stuck in a bad relationship or an untenable career or working situation. And then also, phobias, right? So it's like if somebody has a phobia of spiders, then when they start thinking about, hey, I might be around a spider, or even just thinking about spiders in general, that's where the intensity can rev up such that panic attack actually comes on.
That's thank you so much, Mr. Brian. And there will also be signs. A person that wants to get to the point of panic attack. I remember you said panic attack is is driven by past traumas, and there could also be signs that I could be getting to a point of panic attack, Mr. Brian. Are there any signs that someone might, see or prune that someone is getting to the point of experiencing a panic attack, Mr. Brian?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think what it touches upon is the fact that I'm not saying it never happens, but typically, right, you don't go from a zero on the anxiety and panic scale of, hey, I'm totally calm, I'm totally relaxed, I'm having a great day, to flip the switch, I'm up to a 10 out of 10 on the panic meter, seemingly out of nowhere. And I don't mean that in the sense that, well, what I'm getting at is there can be times, and there's often times where panic feels as though it has no immediate cause, or we can't point to a specific thing that is seemingly driving it. At the same time, it's more the feelings that I'm talking about, right? So even if we can't identify the cause of it, we typically will be more on edge prior to a panic attack arising. So again, it's sort of thinking of anxiety and panic on a 0 to 10 scale and saying to ourselves, going from a 0 on the anxiety scale or the panic scale immediately to a 10 is rare. Typically, one of the signs that you might be approaching a panic attack is that you are inching your way towards a 10. And then there is some point in time where maybe you're at a 5, maybe you're at a 6, that then tips over into 10. And all of a sudden you have that really acute and intense experience that we call a panic attack, right? So that is one way of looking at things and answering the question. I think a couple others that are important, right, is sort of just like if you are hyperfixated or hyper aware of your body and the sensations in your body, that can be a sign that like a panic attack could potentially be in your future. I'm not saying that it's going to be, but it's possible. So that might be like if if you're really focusing on your heart rate, or you're really focusing on the movement of your limbs or something like that. If you're really focusing on your body itself, maybe how you're sweating, uh, it's sort of an indication that, right, you're moving up that scale of the panic meter or the anxiety meter, and you're almost giving yourself what's the right way to put it? It's sort of like you're waiting for an excuse or some permission to then tip from a 4 or 5 out of 10 all the way up to a 10. And I don't say that in a judging way. It's more just that, again, it's like, hey, if you're looking out for something, if you're like, hey, where's the panic? Where's the panic? Where's the panic? The first sign you get of, hey, it might be right there, all of a sudden the hypervigilance may turn on and you go to that 10 out of 10. I think a couple other quick ones would just be, if you are startling easily. So like, let's say, for example, you walk down the street and you can feel that, tenseness in your body. And if somebody calls your name and all of a sudden you shake and you kind of almost get a jolt of fear, that can be a sign that you're in that heightened state, right? And not necessarily at a 10 out of 10, but maybe 5 out of 10, 7 out of 10. And that can be an indication or a preview of what's to come. Again, doesn't guarantee that you're going to go to 10 out of 10, but it is just sort of a warning sign. And then I think the last piece is avoidance behaviors, right? So is somebody For example, are they avoiding things that scare them? For a lot of folks like that experience anxiety, driving a car can be a scary thing because they say to themselves, what if I lose control? What if I have a panic attack behind the wheel? What if I crash my car and I hit a bunch of people? What if I hurt myself? What if I hurt other people? Another one that, avoidance behavior or thing that people with panic disorder and anxiety disorders tend to avoid is like crowded places or places that are claustrophobic. So that might be, going to the market, that might be going on public transit, going on the train or something like that. So if you find yourself avoiding those behaviors, but also knowing that you're going to have to go to those places or do those things, that can be a sign that, hey, maybe that once again going back to that scale, maybe you're walking up the scale to a 5 or a 7, and that is sort of priming your body in a negative way for an eventual panic attack. And I think I might have this wrong, but just kind of a funny fact, right? Is there's a term called agoraphobia, and it is sort of like a fear of new places, a fear of crowded places, akin to what I was describing a minute ago. I might be wrong on this, but I think it comes from a Greek word, which means fear of the market, I think. And you kind of, if you think about that, you say fear of the market, as in, going back to ancient civilizations, you used to go to an actual market, get your food, get your bread, maybe get, some alcoholic beverages or whatever, but you went to a marketplace rather than the supermarket. And so back then, I think it was, hey, when folks were afraid to go and do all that socializing and, chat with people and be in a crowded place where, hey, they could lose, their sense of calm and maybe have a panic attack. I guess that's a fitting description for what that phenomenon is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brian. And from your experience, Mr. Brian, there will definitely be lessons you've learned in your time in years when it comes to panic attack, managing panic attack, and even helping people who have gotten to the point of panic attack. What lessons do you think, or what do you think is the most important lessons you've learned from helping people to manage panic attack, Mr. Brian?
Yeah, good question. There's like a high level answer I want to give, and then also a low level one. So, the high level is so if you talk to therapists, doctors, folks who work, in the mental health space, they will say that panic disorder, which is, essentially the condition, the name of the condition for someone who experiences panic attacks, the hallmark or the most difficult part of panic disorder is the fear of the next one, right? It's not necessarily, and I'm not discounting it whatsoever, right? Having a panic attack is scary. So it's not, it's not like, hey, these panic attacks are easy. I'm just afraid of the next one coming on. The whole thing stinks and it's terrible, right? At the same time, it's that anticipation, it's that fear that the next one is coming on that is indicative of the disorder itself. And so I really am not trying to aggrandize things or what's the right word? I'm not trying to make them sound, cleaner and sexier than they are. At the same time, I think it's important to reframe things a little bit, right? And say, okay, if panic disorder sort of perpetuates itself through our inability to let go of the possibility of the next panic attack coming on, then maybe, right? Like maybe we need to desensitize ourselves to panic attacks in general. And then this is where I'm saying, like, I'm not trying to, romanticize this thing or anything like that, but maybe on some level we need to have a panic attack and find a way to work through it, right? So this kind of goes, points at the fact that like our minds, our brains are wired for survival and they want to keep us alive. And one way that they do that is they prepare us for the worst case scenario. And so when I'm talking about panic disorder and the fear of the next one and all that, what can happen in our minds is we're not in the middle of a panic attack right now, but we're thinking about being in front of one. And that's sort of indicative of anxiety in general, where it's like, there's not an immediate threat in front of us, but we are just afraid of running into that threat in the future. One of the difficulties of how the brain works is because it, sort of prepares us for the worst case scenario. When we're doing that, activity in our brains to say, "Oh, I'm afraid of the next panic attack," we are typically picturing something so horrendous and so horrific, the worst possible outcome, the worst possible scenario, the worst kind of panic attack ever. And I'm not, again, I'm not trying to romanticize this or anything like that. Panic attacks stink. They're terrible. They really hurt and they're painful, right? At the same time, it can be helpful to go through a panic attack, come out on the other side and say, hey, that may have been awful, but it also may not have been as bad as I was making it out to be. And as soon as we have an experience like that, we start to give ourselves the ability to detach from that piece where we're fearing the next one, right? And again, nobody wants a panic attack. Nobody wants to experience one. However, at the same time, once we can get our brains to make that determination to be like, look, it's still going to hurt and it's still going to stink, but I'm here picturing, things being, basically me dying, and yet I just went through a panic attack and I'm still alive. That allows you to poke some holes in that belief that, hey, this is going to be the worst thing ever and I'm not going to survive this thing. Again, I say that cautiously because sometimes panic attacks are like that. But if you can have one of those experiences where it's not like that, that allows you to begin to move on a little bit, right, and break that sort of chain of fearing that next one. So that was the high level piece that I wanted to talk about. I think the low level is more thinking about, okay, you're in a panic attack or you've been through a panic attack, like what was helpful, right? And I think for a lot of folks the low level is, okay, boots on the ground, tactical, what helped me through that situation, what helped me move on. A couple things, and you may have this question coming up next, I'm not sure, but I think an important thing when you're experiencing a panic attack, which, and I say all of this cautiously because it's so much easier said than done. At the same time, one thing that can be helpful during a panic attack is to ground yourself, right? So you're so like, and I've been through them before, so I'm not trying to make light of any of these things. They're so difficult. But when we are experiencing panic attacks, we're off in our heads. We're so focused on like what's going on in our minds, in our bodies at the current moment. We need something to break ourselves out of that loop of thinking and feeling about what is going on in our minds and in our bodies. And so one of the ways that we can do that, which is challenging because you almost need some sense of awareness to be able to say, I need to go enlist some of these methods and tactics. But at the same time, it's like sometimes just a really quick flip of your mind can help you get yourself out of these things. And some of those tactics that I'm alluding to are get up out of your chair or get up off of the couch or whatever you're doing and just move your body, go for a walk. I guess it's a form of treatment or something like that. It's called EMDR. That stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's a form of treatment that people go through sometimes where they essentially I've only done it a few times, but you essentially you're thinking about something that scares you. You're maybe trying to reprocess a trauma and you're essentially moving your eyes quickly back and forth from one side of the room to the other. And the science behind EMDR is basically saying that your amygdala, the piece of your brain that creates the fear, it is trained to essentially when your eyes start moving back and forth, that is a sign for the amygdala to calm itself down to be like, okay, things are maybe not as scary here or as terrible here as I thought. I think the science suggests that why that's the case, right, is you go all the way back to evolution and, how our bodies are wired and the fight or flight response and stuff like that. The thought is, okay, if the fight or flight mechanisms in our bodies basically were wired to keep us away from physical threats. So, for example, we're in front of a lion and the fight or flight nervous system says, hey, dude, I'm going to, kickstart all these processes in your body so that way you run the heck out of this situation and get yourself back to safety. Then moving all the way forward and saying, okay, if that's how our brains operate, then maybe when we are experiencing mental, emotional, spiritual threats in our current day, then maybe moving our bodies or moving our eyes will also give us that same response to tell our brains that, we're moving ourselves to a safe place. And so the EMDR or the walking itself, I think, can basically send a signal or a message to the amygdala to say, hey, I am doing what you want me to do. I'm doing what you sort of trained me to do. There may not be a lion in front of me right now, but I am acting as though that's the case. And then I am sort of appeasing you because you want me to take that action. You want me to move my body. You want me to move my eyes. And in doing that, I am pacifying or alleviating your concerns. And then that allows the panic attack to move through us a little bit quicker. Moving our bodies is also just great where it allows us to think differently. It allows us to get, some blood flow going, kind of change what we're doing. And I guess to just round this out of the tactical low level stuff, we think about, okay, people will often say, you're feeling panic, you're feeling anxiety, you need to ground yourself. Grounding yourself can mean a lot of different things, but I like to just say that think of it as reconnecting to your five senses, right? So maybe put your feet on the floor, feel the connection of your feet to the ground. If you're sitting in a chair and you don't want to get up or you can't get up, feel the connection of your legs to the chair and just focus on that for a minute, right? You need one simple shift. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's necessarily simple, but some simple concept that you focus on can often get you out of the doldrums of your mind in these situations. So again, get up, go for a walk, move your eyes back and forth. Try to ground yourself, whether it's physically, as in put your feet on the floor, or maybe take a sip of water, take a sip of Gatorade, and just focus on the sensations in your mouth, the taste, the smells, and all that. It's so difficult to go through panic attacks. And again, I'm not trying to make light of any of these things, but the folks that I work with, the people that I have talked to, have found these strategies to be beneficial. And so I just kind of want to throw it all out there in hopes that your listeners find it helpful as well.
I want to thank you, Mr. Brian. You really explain every single thing in details when it comes to panic attack. And to also add on that, Mr. Brian, it is not easy. This panic attack is something that is very tough, most especially for men today. We have a lot of things we do on board. We are the one that could probably be facing more of this panic attack, and we also need to continue to prepare to not make such situation to repeat itself. And lastly, Mr. Brian, there's a question I normally ask Mr. Brian. From the ancestors, from the forefathers, there are a lot of things that do exist during our ancestral time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, what do you think that thing will be, Mr. Brian?
Oh man, I mean it's a good question. It's a broad question, right? Where there are so many different possibilities. I'm probably not going to choose a specific person. I think I am more so going to say that I do wish there was more of a sense of community in our modern times, right? I think that I don't remember the name of the village, but there is a study that gets cited a lot where there was this Italian village, and essentially, right, it was folks that ate a lot of heavy foods. They ate pizza, they ate pasta, they ate, a bunch of red meat. They drank wine, they smoked cigars, they stayed up late, and yet they lived really long. And the study seemed to show that the reason that they lived as long as they did is because they lived in such a tight-knit community, right? They had the support of everybody else in the community. And I think what the study showed also was eventually that, the folks in that community migrated to America, maybe somewhere in Pennsylvania. I can't remember. But eventually, over time, the dynamics of that neighborhood, of that community changed. And all of a sudden, that tight knit quality of the neighborhood, started to go away. And then all of a sudden, those same foods that the folks were eating, back in Italy where they were in the tight knit community started to become, I guess, what the doctors sort of attributed to be the causes of now the fact that they were having diabetes and higher incidence of heart disease and were dying earlier and getting more instances of cancer and stuff like that. And so it's just one study, and I don't even know all the specific details. Again, I'm kind of going off the top of my head here. But I look at a study like that, and I'm like, okay, even if the findings are a little bit, I don't, what's the right word? If they're glamorized a little bit, I think that what we can definitely say is when you're in a tight knit community, when you have support, when you are loved by people, when you are supported by people, that really benefits us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all that. And so, I live in America, and I mean, it's a great country, obviously. I'm not trying to discount it or anything like that, but we do not have that sense of community, broadly speaking, in America, where, I live in a city. I have friends in the city and whatnot, but I think back to stories like that where I'm like, wouldn't it be kind of nice if we all lived in a nice, quaint Italian village? We knew everybody in the community, we supported everybody, and by virtue of that, everybody lived longer and lived happier days. So that's how I would answer that question, because it ties up everything that we've talked about, in the sense that when you're supported, when you're loved, when you have people that you can rely on, your mental health improves. You probably don't experience as many panic attacks. Sure, maybe there's still some anxiety in there and whatnot, but like when you are truly loved, when you are truly supported, the mental health piece comes right behind that. So I would love to see something like that. Such a broad answer. There's no way of really implementing that, so to speak. But a guy can dream, I guess I'll say.
So do I, Mr. Brian. I definitely want to see community back on board, and we hope it definitely happens again. It is very, very going off in our time today, and it's really, really making life more difficult, more anxiety, more depression, even suicide have increased dramatically. I hope, and we hope it comes back again. I want to sincerely thank you for the time, for the opportunity, for speaking on the topic of panic attack. Thank you so much, Mr. Brian.
Thanks, Tammy. I appreciate you having me, and thanks for coming with some great questions. So,
Yeah. All right. So I have one who Mr. Brian. Bye bye.
bye.